Welcome to your daily dose of theological German. We are on installment number 13 of this book here, The Kingdom of God and Christendom by Albert Schweitzer, and looking at his thoughts on the comparison of Ezekiel and Jeremiah with regards to the righteous remnant. The simultaneous and the same event concerning announcements of the two prophets, that doesn't sound clear at all. What is going on here? Is this one of those heavily modified nouns that we keep seeing in German? Yes, it is. It's very irritating, but we have to deal with it. Here you have an article. Here you have the noun that actually goes with that article. And here you have a genitive modifier afterwards, the two prophets. That's not super confusing. But in between the article and the noun, you have all this other stuff. And so first thing you got to do here is realize that the announcements of the two prophets, that's your main kind of noun phrase. You then need to notice, let me grab another color, that this den here is telling you, because this noun, bekundigen, wow, I'm glad I got through that one. Because that noun is feminine, then den tells you this is a dative case. And so you're actually not starting the sentence with the subject, but in fact with the object, a dative object. And that's not totally irregular to begin sentences with objects in German. You can do that, and I think it's probably more common actually when those objects are dative because of the kind of nuance and sense that it makes. And so that's what's going on here. So we'll have to find the subject in just a minute, but first I want to deal with all of these modifiers. But we start with the announcements of the two prophets. The first thing then which modifies is this participle here, which is actually functioning as an adjective, but because it's a participle, it can relate then to the rest of that stuff in the middle in a way like verbs do, as you'll see in just a moment. But this is the verb betreffen, and it means something like to concern in the sense of to be relevant, okay? So not concern as in worry, but concern as in relevance. And so that's the sense there. So you've got the announcements of the two prophets that are relevant to or concerning what? And this is where this is kind of an object of the verb almost. So you have the same times, they are concerning the same times and the same event, okay? And so that's your kind of object in this sentence is going to be the announcements of the two prophets which concern the same times and the same events. Okay, but that's not your subject, that's your object. So where's the subject? Well, first of all, let's grab this here. We can say thus for that, and I'm going to switch colors back to yellow again. Thus, here's your subject. Two entirely different views or opinions concerning the deliverance lie to the ground, or maybe you could say underlie would be a good English translation. Underlie or form the basis of. Now you pick up your dative object. Two totally different views of the deliverance form the basis of the announcements of the two prophets, which concern the same times and the same event. So the only other thing I want to talk about here, beyond what we've already commented on, is this here, zugunde. This is technically an adverb, and yet it's not really next to the verb like adverbs usually are. Most of the time adverbs go somewhere closer to the verb. What's it doing down here at the end of the clause? Well, this is another case, and we've seen at least one other instance of this, where you have something that's kind of like a separable verb prefix in the end, but it's fuzzy, and German authors aren't totally sure what to do with it, and so they're writing it like it's a verb prefix and putting it down at the end of the clause, but you won't find it that way in the dictionary because lexicographers have not agreed that that's in fact what it is. And so when you look this up in the dictionary, you will find an adverb for zugunde, and then you have to start looking through the entries and see, okay, when zugunde is an adverb modifying gehen, which is why these are two different words here, you can see, and the adverb comes before the verb, as it should, then it means to perish, okay? And then you have a second example, which is exactly the one we are looking at, where you have a adverb that modifies liegen, and you get something like to form the basis of. And so I translated it woodenly as lies at the ground, and so you can semantically see how you would get lying at the base or at the ground gives you to form the basis of. But really, this is actually not just an adverb modifying a verb, because if it was, it probably wouldn't be down here at the end of the clause like this. And in fact, I get these excerpts from Ziefle's Graded Reader, and in his apparatus, where he gives you some little helps about these different German words and expressions, He writes this all together, zugrunde liegen, as one word. So he seems to think it's a separable verb prefix, which is kind of interesting because it's technically not, unless it is. And so you actually are starting to see here, there's a kind of fuzziness. And really all a separable verb prefix is, even when it's a preposition or some other kind of prefix, it's a modifier that's modifying the verb. It's just that it modifies it in such a way that it kind of creates a totally new process that's not the process construed by the verb by itself. And when that happens, when that kind of semantic relationship happens, where you essentially transform the verbal process into something else with that modifier, then syntactically, Germans will write it in this way, and we do similar things in English. If you haven't seen my video on verb prefixes, separable verbs in particular, you should really go and check that out. It was on this channel as a special edition a week or so ago, and it'll help you to kind of make sense of a lot of this. But really, that's all any separable verb prefix is. It's a modifier, and it goes down to the end of the clause for a variety of reasons, which would make more sense if you go watch that other video. But once it's at the end of the clause, the only time it goes before the verb is if the verb itself has to be at the end of the clause because of German word order. And so that would be the case in like for an infinitive or a participle, because those are both verbal forms that are used to complement other conjugated auxiliaries. And so they have to go at the very end of the clause, and that forces that modifier then to go in front of the verb. And in the case of the so-called separable prefixes, they just get rid of the space. And so that's why it appears that it's all one word with a separable prefix. But really, actually, I think for an English user, maybe it's fine for Germans to think of those as separable prefixes, but for an English user, I think it actually makes way better sense and is easier to understand if you think of it as an attachable verb modifier. How about that? Anyways, as always, do like and subscribe and share with everybody you possibly can. And comments. I love comments. I love to interact with the viewers and what you guys are interested in. Love to hear ideas and tips and feedback of any kind, negative or positive, doesn't matter. I did have one suggestion that I should begin reading the sentences aloud in German at the beginning so that people could really see German as a language in its own right before the translation. And I think that's a great idea. And I will eventually start doing that, but I just need to build my confidence of my German pronunciation because I've never actually spoken to a German person. I've just only ever read German. And so I don't even know what I'm doing when it comes to saying things, but I say a lot of them. So